Hey everybody, how we doing? Hope you're good. Hope you've had a good Monday and a good start to the week. And as Christmas is, I'm going to get in this with this very limited background. So I hope you're well, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. Obviously tonight is really all about Mr. Peter Underwood, the legend that is Mr. Peter Underwood, and it is an absolute delight to bring in his grandson. So, good evening, Adam.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure because I think I saw your Twitter page, which is essentially in tribute to and trying to raise the profile of Peter's work, and that's where I first got to know you. So thank you first of all for kind of agreeing to come on, and I know that this is it is going to be Peter's show. We are going to talk about Peter a lot this evening because. Well, we'll go into that. So for anybody who does not know or has not come across Peter Underwood before, we're going to thoroughly go through his life and why he's so important. But do you want to start, by saying a little bit about yourself, first of all, Adam? Because, I know we are going to be talking about Peter, but, your granddad and all that. But do you want to say a little bit about yourself, first of all?
No, not really.
You keep it as very brief if you like, very, very brief.
I'm the grandson of Peter Underwood. My name's Adam.
That'll do.
It would be. I mean, I couldn't. I would. I think I'd shrink in shame if I tried to. If I evoked the mundane nature of my life and work compared to what we have on offer to discuss.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it would just dissolve in shame. Just the sheer mundanity of my everyday life compared to what he was doing and getting up to.
Well, don't put yourself down too much, Adam, but because you've worked bloody hard, I've got to say, raising his profile and keeping it out there, basically keeping the name of Peter Underwood out there. I've got to say.
Yeah. Well, it was nice to hear from you, and I did instantly recognize your name, and I remembered that we had corresponded in the past when I was more intensely on Twitter.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about what you've done on Twitter and the website and things like that as well. So, I mean, how I'm going to try and condense this down in terms of an hour with Peter's work and what he's done, but in a nutshell, I mean, how can you sum the guy up really? But did you want to try and sum up his life? If you can, who was, for anybody who doesn't realize and tuning in, who was Peter Underwood in a kind of very, very brief synopsis, and then we'll go into it in a lot more detail.
Oh, I need the amazing quotes that he would rely upon to, that would be on the back of the books. Just he was president of the Ghost Club for decades, and president and chief investigator. He was known for respected in the field for maintaining the middle ground between skepticism and uncritical belief, and he was known as the Sherlock Holmes of psychical research.
And I think what we'll do before, I mean, I don't want to call this kind of, we've got a few, sorted out a couple of PowerPoints, one about the equipment that he talks about that he used to use, and we could talk about the equipment he used actually during his practical stuff of investigating his life, obviously. But what I'll do is I'll just play for everybody watching a little, it's only like a minute and a half long, a few little quotes from Peter, that some of the things he wrote down around ghost hunting, and just a little bit about him and in his viewpoints, to get it allows people to kind of understand where his viewpoints. We'll bring ourselves back. We'll bring ourselves back into there. So, just Alex, I wanted to put a little bit together about some of the things he said. I mean, it's almost impossible. The number of books, the sheer amount he wrote was just incredible, really, in his lifetime, and he packed a hell of a lot into his life. So, I hope you don't mind me doing that, but obviously, and to make people aware, I mean, we've literally just passed his 10-year anniversary of his death. I think he died end of November, I believe, in 2014. Did you as a family mark that at all, or was it a case of just it's been a little while now, so it's not something that's in your mind day to day?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a thing where you're more shocked by other people's constant reverence that that outweighs or transcends your own. I mean, that makes me sound like, oh, it's terrible, but obviously I think about him a lot, so I've put a lot of thought into what he did in his life.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I do find it, but it's very touching, obviously, when other people memorialize and mark his time. And I mean, what you did just there, it was lovely. And you pull from the preface to Ghosts and How to See Them, which I've done before as well. It has a very kind of melancholy tone to it. 92 or 3 when he published that. So yeah,
exactly. I mean, some of the things, I mean, it's tricky because obviously he goes into a lot of detail in his books around the process of investigating how, and some people might think, well, it's a little bit old fashioned. It's how things used to be, and but in his books there are nuggets of brilliant advice for anybody. It doesn't matter whether you're kind of been doing this since the 1940s, like Peter had been, but or modern day. There are things in there which we can still learn from. So I think that's really important. So let's kind of delve into his little life a bit. So here we have obviously a very young Peter Underwood.
Yeah, I do wonder just how young. I was going through all the photos again before this to help you to research, and I couldn't remember coming across this one. But I think it's maybe one of the youngest photos we have of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe he's a teenager.
Yeah, I'd say he
looks.
He's still looking pretty dapper, I've got to say. And and I said this online. The fact that I mean, to me, Peter Underwood was one of the last great kind of gentleman ghost hunters. He's in a tie, a waistcoat, and a suit, and that's ghost hunting.
I know, especially in the Ghost Hunters documentary, and he's got that huge jacket with the lapels and.
Oh, he's seriously dapper. So we should definitely go back to that era. I'm loving it. So here we are. Obviously, so from your recollection, then, at what point did Peter start to kind of roughly get into? Was it his teenage years, or was there a particular reason why he got into ghost hunting in the first place?
No, what he says is that it started when he was on holiday, holidaying during the summer months with his grandparents. So I think he's 7 or 8 or something, and in Rose Hall Farm. And whilst he was staying there with his grandparents, people will stop by and ask to see the haunted room, and he'd be like, the haunted room. And so his grandparents would tell him the story about the haunted room, and he would be given the duty of escorting people to the room to show it to them and to regale them with the full story. So just this beguiling sort of idea that people would stop by and knock at the door and say, can we see the haunted room? And he's thinking at this age, what? Ghosts, okay. I don't know about all that. But as he does it time after time, presumably, or several times, he begins to think, well, maybe there's something more to this. And it's a bit of a grisly tale. There is also the early passing of his father about a year or two later, and he wonders whether he sees a figure that looks like him, on the night of hearing of his having passed away of his bed. Although it does have a similarity to the original Rose Hall ghost story. So, you know, as he himself would say, you know, our imagination is quite powerful, and you know, if you're told there is a certain manifestation that happens in a certain place under certain conditions, and you go there, you know, you're quite well disposed to maybe see those things yourself. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that sort of
Uh,
thing. Yeah.
and I mean, I know we're kind of blocking the label up here down here, but obviously from a very early age, he had a very close friend, a Ghost Club Society member called Tom Brown,
Yeah.
and I think even in his 20s, he started kind of going investigating. I think books were well out of the picture at this point, weren't they? Until much later on in his life, but
Yeah. I
he
mean,
definitely went around investigating a lot.
he was following reports. He would follow things in newspapers, and he would get in that way. And also, I think via his also being, when he becomes a member of the Ghost Club, I think in the late 40s, maybe 49 or something, 47 to 49, somewhere around that time.
Yeah,
And that becomes his kind of entry to these things. But I, you know, because you read about him, you know, him and a friend when he's a young kid saying, oh, there's this haunted cottage out in Hitchin, you know, near where he lived in Hertfordshire. Oh, let's go and check it out. But yeah, obviously by this point, it's really become quite a serious but still kind of personal passion project.
yeah, absolutely. I
But
mean, the fact that he's going. I mean, this for those that I know this is kind of blocked out, but this is Borley Rectory in 1947. So he's probably one of the very few people that that was actually kind of. I know that this was immediately after the fire that kind of pretty much ripped through Borley Rectory. But in the 1940s, he was going off with Tom investigating these reports and Borley, would you say he, that with the fame of Borley Rectory, do you think he was just drawn to it, like any other kind of haunted location? It wasn't anything particularly special, or was it special for him?
yeah, I think, you know, there are probably books that maybe help evoke the culture at the time and how important Price was, and you know, he was in the headlines, wasn't he? His investigations were really quite well known, and I think, you know, he was following his work obviously with great enthusiasm, and you know, would buy his books covering Borley as soon as they were out in the bookshop. And you know, he ends up writing his own book, just sort of condensing everything that happened there into one volume, just trying to put it all together. So he's
Yeah,
obviously really quite enthused by it all. I mean, he decides to, and you know, it's interesting because there's the blue book which Price kind of put together for observers, didn't he? So
yeah, yeah,
he rented Borley for a year and said, you know, here's the guide, here's the blue book for you to, you know, for anyone, members of the public can come and do it. And I think, you know, that's obviously a big driver, isn't it, for someone to say, well, you can do it, you know, you can come and you can do
yeah.
it yourself. So he goes to Borley and spends the night there, and he files a report and sends it to Price. You know, Price responds and says, thank you, and maybe you'd like to join the Ghost Club, you know, and that's it, you know, and it comes in. And it must have been the seriousness of the way he presented the report. I mean, he did publish that, and when I read it, you know, and then finally when you see in his other writings like the Ghost Hunter's Guide, he's kind of expanding upon this original blue book. He incorporates it into it, and he's obviously sort of feels like he's inheriting that legacy of seriousness of approach to the investigation and what you do. And you know, so yeah.
I was going to say, because you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I mean I'll show it a bit when I'm bigger screen, but yeah, the Ghost Hunter's Guide, which is one of his, I think, one of his most popular books. But he includes all of Harry Price's advice. You know, the 8 or 9. I think originally the blue book, I think, was only about 8 or 9 pages, but
Right.
it was a really simple guide, essentially,
Right.
wasn't it? And then he's obviously, you know, he's taken what Harry Price did,
Yeah.
and like I said, expanded on it, but kept that seriousness of it. So he was never one to kind of, you know, I think that's the one thing he was well known for, is being very studious in terms of how he recorded things and things like that. So we'll talk. I mean, do you want to say a little bit about, you know, how he went about these things?
I mean, it has to be why he rose up and became the president, you know, of the club. I assume that Price was just such a role sort of model, a kind
Yeah.
of you know, mentor in a way, and he was really following in his footsteps, and the way his approach to investigations and everything, it just must have made a sort of natural sense, and it does explain why he did lead the club, and you know, and was its chief investigator, you know, going out and really tackling these things, and sometimes spending years investigating cases, you know.
Yeah. Do you know what's quite interesting? We'll go through. Obviously, he ended up writing The Ghost of Borley, which is obviously goes into, you know, goes into obviously about Borley Rectory, but from the point that he first investigated it, like I said, it had already been caught alight. And then really followed, I think, from the 1950s onwards, going around the country, and like you see there, I mean, he wasn't averse to kind of doing seances and whatever it needed, essentially, to investigate places.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, in a way, I was just thinking about looking at them again. They are the most sort of photogenic, you know, things
Yeah.
to do. They make for good photos, and there are, you know, it's hard to find images of him investigating. But then again, like, if you do all that, it does look very staged, and you know, so you can easily come under criticism for that. And like Price did as well. Like, oh, here's a photo of the ghost hunter in the bird box or whatever, overlooking the house, and it's like, well, if you're going to take a photo, you do sort of have to kind of stage it a little bit. I mean, there is one of him sort of dusting, you know, on a windowsill, you know, just sort of setting things up, but it does look very staged. But these seances, I know he was, you know, quite skeptical about them. He does say so, but obviously, yeah, he did take part, especially in this one, Aspley Guys, you know. And this is the one where, as I say, he reads about it in the newspaper and he phones them up. You know, it's a case where someone wants their rents reduced because they claim that there's some ghostly activity, and so the council says, right, let's have an official investigation, and let's hire a medium, let's have a seance, and why not, while we're at it, we'll let this, you know, Peter Underwood come in as well. He'll help us investigate and get to the bottom of it. That's why he called it like the first official ghost hunt. But he's, you know, he says he found it in the newspaper, phones up the council and gets in on the, you know, this council-funded investigation of this house to determine whether the owner of it deserved to have their rates lowered or whatever on the property.
From what I've read, he was always kind of like known for, obviously, for the ghost hunting and being very objective and collecting evidence and writing reports and those kinds of things. Did he ever kind of help in debunking psychic mediums on people like that, or did he kind of steer away from that kind of avenue?
Well, I think maybe it comes back to what you say about his character and this sort of gentlemanly like nature. I mean, when reading his work, and you know, it's a shame personally, I never really got to talk to him in person deeply about these things. He was just a wonderful grandfather who was always amazing when we visited, but we never got deep into it. But you know, I noticed reading his work that he says, you know, if you read between the lines, you'll kind of get a sense of how I feel about this case. As in, I won't be explicit, but if you're a careful, gentle reader, read closely, you'll know, you know. And I think it's just part of his character is not to say, you know, oh, don't be, you know, that's rubbish, or don't be stupid, you know. But so I don't think that would be hit the sort of his bag, really, his cup of tea.
I mean, it is. I mean, I know you sent me lots and lots of kind of images around some of the locations he'd been to. I'll just point out to people. I mean, Aspley Guys, Sawston Hall is just two. The Ghost Hunter's Almanac, written by Mr. Peter Underwood, goes through hundreds of places in England, Wales, Scotland, and just all over the UK. Plus,
it's a nice
Haunted Houses is a fantastic book in terms of in more detail about each particular location. Have you been able to track down how many places Peter actually visited in his lifetime?
Well, I guess I would go. I tend to just follow his own mentioning, his own reference at the beginning of the Gazetteer, where he says, like, there's an asterisk. Every time you see an asterisk, that means that I'm personally acquainted with this case. So that you can kind of see if he did, and he left signposts like that in the Gazetteer, maybe not elsewhere. So that's what I've used as a guide, that he himself is quite explicit, at least in the Gazette of British Ghosts, which got republished as the A to Z of British Ghosts. And I think that maybe gets compacted down into the almanac you're referring to. Yeah. I mean, what was interesting is that he kept this huge file of information about everything, and that's what I was saying to you the other day, that I hadn't noticed before in the Ghost Hunter's Guide, because I haven't read every page from every book from front to back, but I've dipped into so much of it. But he says he's got this amazing huge file and index of everywhere that he's heard about or known about and made a note about. And that's the birth of the Gazetteer of British Ghosts, the Geographical Dictionary of British Ghosts, like the almanac you're holding. He has a huge file where he's just building it up and just cross-referencing everything for different types of manifestation and making notes as to, reports, witnesses, and going back to it and whatever. He calls it his confidential files in the Ghost Hunter's Guide. And that eventually becomes like the publicly accessible, readable book, which again is a bit like, here anyone can, use it and travel around and visit these sites. But it seems to have originated in this huge, sprawling file. It'd be great to find it. I didn't know it existed, to be honest. Maybe I can ask someone who might have.
Absolutely. I just put this image on because this is a very famous image. Well, one of the most famous images, really, of a ghost, which is the tulip staircase ghost. Was this was the photo that was sent to Peter? Is that correct? From
Reverend Hardy.
Yeah,
am I getting that right?
Yeah, I believe you have. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, it's quite nice in a way seeing this image, because you can see with the crease line down it and things like that.
He would rely on a black and white copy that was made before the damage, I think, was accrued to this, which is as you say, it's brilliant because it's the original Polaroid and it's color. But what we used to see is the black and white copy, and I think he would refer to the black and white one that was made of it.
Yeah, that's the thing. That black and white image was just is the really the one that's most popularly known. But the fact that this is the original color Polaroid image, I love that for this reason.
Yeah, I was going to include the black and white one, but I thought you're bored of seeing that. Everyone's bored of seeing that, and this is the original one, and why it's kind of tucked away, I think, is because of this damage on the left-hand side. So it felt like the copy that was made was better, and obviously better for reproduction on covers of books and whatnot, but or interior for an illustration. But that was the one that this reverend sent him, who was just visiting Greenwich that day and took a photo of the staircase.
Absolutely. And I just love the fact that that's the original, and that's the original kind of version of that well-known photo, that it's in color.
I know.
Okay, let me just so I mean, it is almost impossible to kind of for anybody who didn't really realize how much work Peter Underwood put into ghost hunting and publishing his books. I mean, it's just over a 40-50 year period, or is it slightly less than that, where he really was a non-stop author of ghost hunting books and the supernatural.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he'd done so many things, and had documented it all. And as I say, with the confidential files being the origin of the Gazetteer book you see here, that it originates in all these notes and files and indexes. There's so much material that he's already produced in a way, and I suppose he finds a novel way to to publish it publicly. Although it's an interesting wrinkle that it begins as confidential and it becomes kind of just public. But and that becomes like then he just haunted London, and it becomes like the method for doing other areas, and it becomes like a popular form. But definitely, I mean, I think from he was already writing. He wanted to publish his book on Borley decades before, but the Borley report, published by a couple of investigators, I forget their names off the top of my head, but were associated with the Society for Psychical Research, their damning report on Price's work kind of really kind of put it back on the shelf. But I think he was really quite desperate, keen to publish, much earlier.
So for those that don't realize, this is not Borley, obviously. This is the White House. So in terms of all of his letter heading, and he would write about the White House. This is his former home. So it's quite famously, when he was alive, this is his where his letterheads had the White House on it and things like this is where he used to live. I mean, what are your memories of this home?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking now, it's the house that ghost hunting built, I mean, I think,
Yeah,
and it was on the back of the success of the Gazetteer. So when he finally publishes a book in 71, he says, the success of it allowed him to, finally find a nice place to settle down in, and and quit the day job and devote his life full time to this. So I think he really did. Yeah, he uses it on his letterhead. I sent you that, and I think he was really, really, really loved being there. And obviously, he later on even writes a book about haunted Farnham and
Odyssey.
so forth. But it was an amazing place to visit. We loved visiting him for Easter and Christmas and whatever, whenever we could go. It was always a joy to head down to Farnham on the train from Waterloo East. And it was really exciting. He'd meet us at the station and drive us up I remember the gravel drive, as we entered, and then the dog would be yapping away at us as we came through, and endless treats and snacks. And he'd be full of so much life, and he'd be so funny. That's the thing. I wish I could remember them all, but he'd have so many anecdotes. And he'd just small little stories, from personal experience from the other day or what happened when you were there, and he'd regale you with them. And it was just it was just.
And beside the door, there's a bell. What can you tell me about this kind of the bell? It's known as the Borley bell. Is that correct?
I'm not the expert on it, but it is a relic from the rectory. I don't say that because I get confused. Wait, the church, or wait, what's a rectory? Is the rectory the house you live in, or is that the church next to it? Why would a bell be on a rectory?
Yeah,
I believe it is the rectory bell from the main house that got caught in the fire.
And is it still there?
No. Another paranormal historian has it fixed to their house.
God, how dare they? So, I was going to say, there's a couple of photos here of you with, in the White House. I mean, so growing up, like I say, talking to your grand, was he quite a private person? Did he speak about much about the ghost hunting thing, or was it kind of like just something that he did and didn't really mention it that much?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was that way. I mean, now I think, oh God, why didn't I just take him aside and say, let's hear about it. Come on, or why didn't I take more time later to? But I suppose, yeah, maybe part of it might have been like maybe when I said, oh, I've read a few pages of this that you've just published, and yeah, maybe he wasn't super keen to get into it, or it wasn't the right thing to do. This wasn't a time for that. It was family time. So yeah, maybe it was a bit of that.
He always. I mean, I never got a chance to meet him, unfortunately, or listen to him talk or anything like that. So, can you kind of like paint a picture of the man that you remember, that you know?
Well, I mean, I think I suppose I try. I don't want to waste any more airtime. Maybe try any better than I already did. I suppose with the sense of his just having a really just I don't know, just being really socially advanced. You'd feel like an idiot. Like, well, why don't I have these amazing, like, funny little anecdotes to regale people with when I meet them? And they don't have to be about famous people that you've met or amazing things. They can just be about very simple things. Oh, I should learn little stories to tell that are funny or that are amusing. But yeah, someone. I don't. Yeah, I mean, and as you said, in terms of like this character, just like this affable gentleman with strong character. Yeah, just a strong character who was always warm and generous and funny. I kind of think I can do better than that.
Was he quite humble in terms of, because I mean in his life he'd produced so many books, but was he quite humble with it? He strikes me as somebody who'd be quite humble and not really kind of shouting it from the rooftops that his achievements.
Yes, that's true. Actually, that's true. I should say that. I mean, I think he didn't take himself too seriously. That's the thing that was really amazing about it, which is that he really had no problem at all in terms of making fun of himself and or even making light of what he did. I mean, I suppose you get enough of it in terms of what the the kinds of things he might hear or get when he talks to other people anyway, in addition to his work. So, but yeah, it never took himself too seriously. But I understand didn't suffer fools gladly. But that's not something I experienced. I heard that never suffered fools gladly.
And the lovely thing in this photo, I really do like this photo, because I think here he is in his 90s at this point, and yet Tom Brown, the chap who we investigated Borley Rectory with in the 1940s, is still a good friend, and the fact that they're sharing a drink and things is just, I think that's the loveliest photo. The fact that these two old ghost hunters have kind of started off of these beginnings of Borley Rectory, and
I know,
there
they look
they
like
are in the
they're
90s.
chatting about their next, where they're going to next. I mean, look at his friend Tom with his suit and tie and his dark glasses and his, he cuts quite a sharp figure. And they, it's I didn't know that when I was there at the time. But they're just like sort of family photos I was flicking through.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's Tom Brown. Oh, my friend Tom Brown. I'm like, yes, that's him.
It's I like to say, it's just, it is incredible the kind of life that this chap led, and all the achievements and all of the writing and the plaudits of, like I say, becoming the president of the Ghost Club and things like that, and just out and out just being really well respected. I know he may not have had as much respect from the Society for Psychical Research and things and people like that, but by and large, he was hugely respected and loved, actually, for all of his. And there's a generation of children, myself included, that grew up reading his ghost books, and they are still everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, he says that the Ghost Hunter's Guide came after was prompted by the kids' book version, the Ghost Hunter's Handbook, which resurfaced in a clip recently where he's presenting it, and he thought, oh, I could do the more serious one came after the junior version.
What I'm going to do next is I'm going to play a little video. Now, this, if you're watching this and it may well be demonetized because of this little video. This is from the 1980s. I am old enough to remember this TV show, which gives you an idea of how old I am. This is from, I think it's called Number 73, with a very, very young Sandy Toksvig, who is basically incomprehensible in some of the stuff that she talks, in how she talks. It's just mumbles. But you can at least see a little bit, 2 minutes worth of Mr. Peter Underwood describing and talking about ghosts. Enjoy.
Is it a supernatural being, somebody who's dead and come back?
Well, we don't really know what a ghost is. There are a lot of
make sure it's all. Let's just go back 1 minute.
Well, what is a ghost? Is it a supernatural being, somebody who's dead and come back?
Well, we don't really know what a ghost is. There are a lot of different kinds of ghosts, and maybe some of them are spirits, but there are atmospheric photograph ghosts, which are some enactment of a previous age reappears. There are cyclic ghosts, which are ghosts which reoccur in the same place time after time. There are ghosts which never appear more than 4 days. There are animal ghosts. There are ghosts of objects, all sorts.
Hundreds of different kinds. But are there different theories about what the ghost is? I mean, do you have your own particular theory of what it actually is?
Well, there are different kinds, but maybe it is something in the atmosphere which is retained for some reason which we don't know, and some people can see these under certain conditions.
So it's a kind of energy, maybe?
Maybe something to do with energy, maybe something to do with atmosphere, maybe something to do with the people involved.
So do you believe in ghosts?
No.
Not at all? You don't believe in them? Not at all. So you may be trying to convince people that
Well, I never try and convince anybody, but the evidence, if you look into it, the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. Since the beginning of recorded history, from every country in the world, every civilization, there have been reports of ghosts.
Really? Yeah. What about the ghosts that speak to you? Hello, I'm going to come and get you. What about those kind of ghosts?
Well, there's very little good evidence for ghost speaking. In the old Victorian ages, there were always stories of ghosts that came back to find something that was lost or to right some wrong. But nowadays, there's very little good evidence for ghost speaking.
Really? Oh, but they do make noises, some of them?
Oh, they make noises, certainly, yes.
And what are they called?
Well, the poltergeist in particular makes noises of footsteps and bangings and raps and even fires and water appearing from nowhere and objects flying across the room.
What have you got in here, Peter?
Well, these are just one or two of the things that I take when I go ghost hunting.
Yeah.
That's one of the books that I wrote.
Oh,
the youngsters, that one in particular.
Have you seen this one, kids? And there's a picture on the front there of a ghost. Is that a real picture?
is reproduced from a real photograph, yes. A very curious photograph.
That's this one here, is it?
That's right.
Let's have a look.
Now,
Tell me about how you got that.
That was at the Greenwich Maritime Museum. Nothing was seen on the staircase when the photograph was taken. It was taken by a retired clergyman from Canada. And there was this picture on this form on the staircase when the picture was...
And oops, got rid of myself. That was good. There we go, and we're back, just the other way around. And I mean, it is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it must be quite lovely to actually hear his voice on the old kind of TV clips like that.
I mean, that only resurfaced a few months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's just scraped from YouTube anyway. I mean, I think someone let me know about it. Yeah, really, literally just this year sometime. And so it's like, oh wow, you know, it's like a lot of these things they just lost in the ether, or maybe someone's found it on a VHS tape, because he would do all these little impromptu brief appearances on television on all these different kinds of shows. But you can't just Google it and find the whole list of all the things he did and track it down. But he did. I was even trying to remember some of the instances of it with a family member. But it's So
it's kind of. I mean, I gotta say, I did find it really. I did find it funny when the kid was basically saying, "No, just don't believe in ghosts."
That's the challenge. I mean, obviously, he was very quite keen to pass it on to the next generation. So I think you're absolutely right. You know, he dedicates the Ghost Hunter's Guide to me and my brother, and the handbook that we just saw, he dedicated that to my cousins. So. And he's in the preface to the Ghosts and How to See Them, he's like, well, if the next generation he's basically saying that if they can continue the work, then maybe my work will not have been in vain, and it's like, gosh. So that really is impulse, yeah.
And that's lovely. I mean, what I'm going to do now is, talking about that in terms of the next, and talking about his mindset, I suppose, of things. You sent me some of the ghost hunting equipment that he would take with him. And some of the ghost hunting, there's quite a bit of ghost hunting equipment he would take.
I know, maybe like a truckload, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so a couple. I'm going to go through some of these, and some of these seem quite nostalgic and quite old-fashioned, but actually, that there's some great pieces of equipment amongst this stuff that he would have. So some of it is kind of fairly straightforward, but bags like that's amazing for starters. No rucksacks. Have a nice. A decent sized bag in which to keep all of his equipment.
Yeah, carpet bag, a leather carpet bag.
Yeah, it's like a doctor's kind of kit. So the paper and pen and pencils, hooray!
Yeah, and he would say you don't need everything. Some people would say keep it simple.
Absolutely. That's it. Well, I mean, I've constantly tried to kind of say, look, less is more. When you go ghost hunting, it's like a camera, maybe a torch, and maybe a voice recorder, and a pen and pencil. And that's your lot. But but actually, there's a few things that he included in his equipment list, which I was thinking, oh my God, some of the stuff that he used to take. So let's have a look, go through some of these other things. Rough plans and sketches of the locations.
Work. Yeah, it gets geological, ordnance survey maps. Let's see if they're underwater, tunnels or things that are other reasons, natural explanations for what might be happening. Let's get a real good survey of the site.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, how many people would do that? How many ghost YouTubers would do that now? Absolutely nobody.
Yeah, it's talk to the witnesses, talk to local people. Let's get really detailed maps of the area. That's before we arrive. And then when you get there,
Absolutely. I love this. Growing up, the idea of thread twine ceiling doors.
Yeah.
Making twine across doorways
or open doorways so that you can be sure that they haven't been tampered with. Securing the site.
I love that. I love old school methods, because actually, I think more people should do it, in terms of sealing off rooms and things like that. Yeah. I just love the going back to basics idea. I really do.
So it comes from police work as well, doesn't it? Sealing off scenes and controlling spaces. It's a similar sort of thing.
Torches, lamps, and matches. Love it. I like the old Tilly lamps and things like that. I don't know how.
Yeah, hurricane lamps.
Yeah, exactly. The humble camera. There we go. It says the try in it. camera and a tripod, Instamatic Polaroid cameras have many advantages, fully automatic cameras have many advantages too. The use of a cine camera is distinctly beneficial in poltergeist cases. The camera enthusiast will also include infrared films, filters, various automatic attachments, and other refinements.
Yeah.
And, I suppose in a way, the fact that people are taking more and more, more and more technical cameras and video equipment is actually a good thing, and I suppose he'd kind of approve of the fact that if it's using cameras in the right ways is a good thing, and it continues to be a good thing.
Yeah, because in '85 he's talking about someone he knows who's figured out how to create sensor activated cameras. Like, that's a new thing.
Yeah,
as a great development to have during your investigation. Set something up that takes a photo when something moves, and we just think, well, that's obvious. Yeah, of course, all our cameras can be set to do that on our phones or whatever. But at the time, that was quite an innovation.
See, then we get into certain things, like stuff that people don't really take anymore. Things like rulers, impact adhesive, assortments of small screws, nails, tin tack, screw eyes, and small hammers and screwdrivers. I mean,
yeah, I'd need to dig back into the uses of everything. I think I got a little lost in the figuring out what all these little things were and visualizing them. But
the thing is, but what he's doing, I mean, the kind of gadget. I mean, I say gadgets, but the stuff that he was taking was all to serve a purpose. And it was in making sure that if he needed something, he had it in his bag. Essentially, if it was setting something up, then he was able to kind of either, screw something in or fix something or make sure something, like with a plumb line, making sure something is straight. It all served a purpose.
Yes, of course. And as you say, it's, depending on what the conditions are, what he's going to take, So I'm reading about one thing just the other day, and it's sort of something that helps you figure out the force or weight of an object, and that would come into a poltergeist case if we're talking about movement of objects and figuring out how easily something moves, or like just a weighing scale, like, is something moving because it's not a flat surface, so things are liable to move of their own accord. Again, a natural explanation that you can then use to rule out, and be skeptical.
Then we've got other things. Was it a pen? What's this? Pen? Was it a penknife? Magnifying glasses? A pair of plimsolls or overshoes? A spring balance for measuring the weight of any article moved by apparently paranormal means. There we go.
Yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, I
strain
didn't finish
gauge.
this, but I should do, because it was yeah.
But I mean, I love this stuff. I really, really do. A strain gauge for measuring the force necessary to close or open a door or drawer. Nobody that I've seen now in modern times would use something like that. And actually, thinking about it, it'd be a really good thing to see how much force is needed to open the door.
You can just see it, can't you? The more seriously you take it, and then the more you think about these individual things, then here's another piece of equipment.
Yeah. And that's just, there's one more here. It's kind of changing. There we go. Watches, preferably with luminous or illuminated dials, that should of course synchronize watches at the commencement of any ghost hunt. In addition, a stopwatch can be very useful on occasions. Again, I love this. I really, really do. I mean, the thing is as well. I mean, I've been looking into the Ghost Hunter's Guide, one of Peter's books, and I'll just read this little bit. It says, every ghost hunter worthy of the name will, however, invent simple gadgets for himself. The bowl of mercury that detects tremors.
Yeah, I love that.
The spirit level mounted on wood or board that can be used to establish or disprove the apparent slight movement of, say, a stair tread. A sealed tin full of fine sand with a tiny hole in the base that leaves an almost invisible trail of silver sand if it is moved. The balance rod connected to a bell or buzzer, that bulb that reveals the movement of an object placed on one end of the rod, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, so he wasn't averse to gadgets as such, but I think, they were all designed, all these gadgets, to disprove or to prove fakery, essentially, to see whether it or something had a natural cause. It wasn't to fake anything.
Yes, and yes, and for things like thermographs and vibration detectors, are also other things to just try and to be able to monitor and 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 tell them about or confirm changes, like, oh, it feels cold in here. And
Yeah.
I've got something that actually shows like the temperature dropping rapidly or something, then you've got something. He was all very keen, obviously, for scientific evidence. I think that must be it. He always holds out hope, I think, that there will be scientific proof, that we can come up with an experiment, where
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
verify the phenomena. And I suppose that's the tragedy of it, that he doesn't feel that within his lifetime you're able to get there. And that's what he wants. He wants rigorous, basic scientific evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just on here. There's a little thing in there which he said: simple equipment is just as effective as in the investigation of ghostly phenomena as the most sophisticated apparatus. For there are drawbacks to the latter. The value of any report is really only as good as the investigator concerned, and it is not really dependent on the equipment used. Here, Mr. Peter Underwood. I love that. I mean, that's what I mean. He talked so much sense, Peter Underwood, and I think people have almost forgotten, because I think, oh, he did it in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and kind of half forgotten some of the methods of his attitude to things.
Yeah.
was really spot on.
Yeah. And just his approach, just when he gives like a tentative schedule for one of the group ghost hunts, at Cushing Manor is the example he gives in the Ghost Hunters Guide, and it starts 8 p.m. introduction, to meet the owners, figure out where you're going to be. 9:30 refreshments, draw up plans, synchronize watches, plan a strategy for the night. And 10:30 place apparatus, automatic cameras, frequency change detectors, etc. And then and then it just carries on. Every half hour he's planned the whole evening out into the early morning.
Absolutely. I mean, the some of the things that he likes in terms of he is almost like a military setup, isn't it? So he's not just I'll go here or there. It's very, very rigorous in terms of how he did it.
Yeah, make sure you've taken off your shoes and put on your plimsoll, your noiseless footwear. Make sure everyone is keeping to the schedule, and yeah.
But was he kind of? I mean, there was no sense of, I'd imagine, like you say, he didn't suffer fools gladly, growing up. But did you get a sense of that from him growing up, or was he just like, your kind old granddad, if you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we have a family anecdote about him when it was just something simple, like he booked a cab to get to the train station, to get a train to get to meet a plane somewhere or whatever, an important travel thing, and the cabbie arrives late, and so then they don't get to the train station on time, and they miss the train. And he says, apparently he refuses to pay the cabbie, and the cabbie says, well, I'm going to keep your suitcases. And the cabbie's holding his 2 suitcases on both hands, and he tells him wherefore is the story, and that was that. So it's just like, well, I suppose you book a cab, if they don't arrive on time, it ruins your whole family holiday plans. I mean, yeah, that's right.
Absolutely, I
think that's the sort of like, don't cross him. He will not be pleased.
I'm going to get onto people's questions for you in a second, but before we do that, just to mention your website that you've set up about Peter Underwood. So peterunderwood.org. I'll just share the screen very briefly, give people an idea of what it looks like, and hopefully it will come on screen. So here we've got a very kind of visual website. I mean, there's so much to this. It must have taken absolutely ages to go through his books, through his life. I'll give people a bit of a brief look at some of the things on this website. So, for instance, we have chapters. You click on that, start of the journey, and then we have just so much information. So, the start of the journey, 1930s. Let's click on one of these, the haunted room, and there you have little snippets of from 1931, 8 years, The Haunted Room. So there's little kind of like quotes and animations and things, which is like a very kind of visual, I don't know, like it kind of gives you a visual kind of look at the kind of some of the investigations they had, in a very interesting and intriguing way. It's just a really, really amazing website. Do you just want to say a little bit about, the website you produced
I
and how
got a
much
bit carried
time it's
away.
taken?
I just wanted to. Well, I was reading his memoirs, and I was just sort of got more enthralled, and I just wanted to track down everything that, when you were asking about, well, what investigations? How do you know the ones he was interested in? That's all I wanted to know. Like, well, what were the ones he was personally interested in, and track all those down, and just try and piece together like a chronology of his paranormal life, and just put those as the staging posts, along the way. And then I ended up trying to just sort of create, I guess, an online sort of visual book, really. So chapters, and then within each chapter, subsections. But I tried to divide it up into decades. So because it starts so early when he's a kid. So 8 years means he's 8 years old.
Yeah.
and then just carry on until the end. And I guess I found it a creative output.
Was it quite a daunting thing when you first started? It must have been quite daunting though when you. What made you want to start doing it in the first place then?
Well, I guess because the sense of his work falling out of print, and I didn't know nearly anything about any of it. And then the more I learned, the more I thought, oh, and the more I literally was looking online for how many books did he write, and how many are there, and what's the extent of it. So I'm trying to amass the total number of writings, and then go through and find the total number of things he personally investigated, and trying to just map it all out.
Yeah.
And I suppose, yeah.
And did you kind of along the way, did you find out more about your granddad than you knew previously?
It's like learning about the shadow life. It's like, for me, I always knew that what he was, what he did, but we never got into it. And now I was finding out all the details about it, and just piecing together his entire life. Whereas I kind of only got to know him, as I'm growing up, when he's already in his 60s when I first meet him, when I'm 8 or 9 or 10. So yeah, it's like finding out about this whole prehistory to what I saw. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, is there anything that you're most proud of when you think about your granddad?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel it's tricky, because I guess, to come back to the other question, it's like, well, part of me is like, oh no, he's got all these books, and I want to republish them, and it feels like, oh, you just want to republish them to make money from the sales of the books. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the same for him. And when I find a file of all his letters, and he was tried so hard over the years to get the rights back to his own work, and I realized I'm just completing that thing. He himself was assiduous in trying to get his work back so he could republish it, and I could see that was his wish, and like for the next generation, for his work to continue on. So in a way, that's my defense for wanting to republish it, is that, well, he wanted it. That's what he wanted.
Absolutely. There's one here a question from PJ Jones saying, question for Adam: did your granddad's stories give you sleepless nights like his books did for me?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think in a way that probably is another reason why I didn't want to know, because I would be so scared, and I found horror films really difficult until I was quite old, to be honest. Watching The Shining as a kid was terrifying. So when I heard about one of the ghost stories associated with his own house, the White House in Farnham, I think I did struggle to sleep that night. And I thought about this rocking chair, or whatever they had said about what they may have seen, and maybe they were just telling a story. But I just thought that this is far too powerful. So I can understand what happens when you're young and you read this, like true ghost stories,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just imagine what it's like.
In terms of the paranormal, then, did any of it rub off onto you, or you kind of like just, your granddad's work is one thing, but you personally, you're not that interested, or you are interested.
Yeah, I think people they're quick to think, oh wait, maybe he just doesn't care about any of it, or he's quick to maybe just dispense with it all, or I maybe they're a little suspicious of me, and it must be something. I don't know. It's funny. I love the culture of it. I love that this is what he spent his life devoted to, and whenever I read one of his entries in his book, I'm charmed, and it's written it as well. Open the gazetteer to any entry and just read one. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. So it feels like a treasure trove.
I bet.
It's just about valuing it, and just because it's so crazy to be able to devote your life to the paranormal in the way he did. I just think it's extraordinary, and it's like, oh, and that's my grandfather. So it's pride, and just like, oh yeah, hey, well, he had such a reputation. My goodness. It's like the outside is just going, oh, like these people asking you questions. I'm just like that, really. But it is like as a cultural phenomenon, the fact that it was so popular and became so popular in the 70s, because I had to double check that. It really did. And that is why his book was so successful. That's why the Gazetteer is so successful.
It really did take off in the 70s. I'm thinking, from whether it's culturally, for certain films at the time, horror movies, all of that kind of thing, it definitely all helped.
Countercultural. I mean, I'm ashamed to say I had to ask an AI chatbot, like, wait, in the 70s, was there a revival of interest in the paranormal? They're like, yes, absolutely, there was in the 70s. And it gave me 5 different bullet points, and I thought, there is, isn't there? There is something. So he's he had the good fortune, in a way, of being around when there was this resurgence of interest, and so it was like perfect timing. His book comes out, and that it's a mega success.
Beardo's asking, Adam, what are your thoughts on where the paranormal is now? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I suppose the thing is, I put so much work into republishing his work, and I'm a bit like mono, like I exist just within this world of him, and it's a struggle for me to get outside of it. I was reading Roger Clark's Natural History of Ghosts, but I think I'm just happy just reading his work. I'm a bit sort of.
It's a nicer place to be. Let's put it that way. I've got to say,
I'm a bit ignorant of other things, and I'm really just like this mono in this mono world, or whatever, this mono Peter Underwood paranormal world.
Yeah. Weird Fox Lou says, great listening to you recount your grandfather. Definitely proud of you. He strikes me. He was a calm, professional gent. Do you get the urge to pick up where he left off?
Well, I have to say, I mean, the more you read about the investigations he would undertake and the way he would organize them, and he introduced these summer visits, when he became president in 1962, and the way he brought these group investigations together. And that's all in Nights in Haunted Houses, really. And I just think that would be something to do. Gather everyone together, create the tentative schedule, follow the procedure, and do it. I think it would be amazing. I mean, sometimes he says, oh, the problem with these investigations is they're boring in one book. But elsewhere,
which is true.
But it must be both, right? I mean, there must be these... anyway, I mean, the way you've sort of set up the temporal experience of being in a place, and just sort of the expectation of something happening, it must just set you in a certain state, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, but I guess the modern sort of paranormal kind of culture, I suppose maybe it scares me a bit. I probably feel happier sort of nestling in the past.
Oh, I think it's a much better place to be. Phil from Ghost Watchers saying, was there ever a case that really, really baffled him and he could not find a rational explanation for the phenomena?
Oh, I wish I had one to hand. I mean, that does sound like something I've read about. That. I mean, I think a lot of cases were bamboozling. I mean, to be honest, I have to say that's probably the result of most of the investigations. I mean, when he gives the example of Cushing Manor in the Ghost Hunter's Guide, at the end he says that all the report is put together, and then all the photographs. In this case, he says several had these kind of spectacular distortions on them on the photographs they took. Anyway, all the evidence is gathered together and put in a box and sealed in the archives in the Ghost Club. I mean, I sent them a message, just wondering, do these things exist? Do these boxes, on the basis investigations, do they still exist somewhere in the Ghost Club? And what I was really taken by was that he says that he puts on the box case number, whatever number it was, unsolved to date. So it feels like it's just mostly an accumulation of unsolved cases.
Yeah.
Terrible mountain of them.
Yeah, one here from Brian saying, what tool, like those in the PowerPoint, seemed to work the best, or was your grandfather's best tool?
Well, he does talk about, keeping it simple, and how recording things with a pen and pencil, pen and paper is one of the most important things to do. But I mean, I don't know. I would assume it would be a camera, just because of how struck he was by the ghost photograph in the tulip staircase.
I'll do a last couple, because we know we've gone over the hour, but just
no. I'm honestly,
sure?
I don't mind staying as long as necessary.
As long as there's questions out there.
Anyone wants me to, I will carry on. I really don't. I really have no.
Bless you. Thank you. Brian saying, did your grandfather ever mention hauntings following him home in any capacity?
Well, I mean, there is a story in his memoirs, in No Common Task, where he talks about a figure, and it is on his way home from work. I mean, he worked for many years for publishers, and there is, but it's one of those cases where he feels like, well, did I imagine it or not? But it is that kind of a story where, and maybe it might spring from that natural sense of kind of fear sometimes when you're just going home from somewhere and returning home from going somewhere.
Friday House says, if one were to start reading his books, which one would you say should be the first one to read? That's a great question.
I don't. For what reason? I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I suppose I think The Gazetteer is a great book, but that perhaps is more enjoyable. Like, if you just want to, read about a case somewhere or other, you can just get a couple of pages, and you'll get something just across the space of a few paragraphs, and you can just, if you need something like that. Like, I was in correspondence with someone who said that they would, before they go to sleep, they would find it very calming to just flip through and read a case, and especially that was during the pandemic. So I guess depending on what your needs are, I do feel like The Ghost Hunter's Guide is quite an interestingly serious book, but perhaps too serious.
Oh no, I like I said, I mean, I'll just show people on this one. This is The Ghost Hunter's Guide. I don't know how we can see that. There we go. Classic 1970s book cover. Love it. All right, there we go. You just about see how cool that book cover is.
Oh, right, I remember Nights in Haunted Houses. Sorry, that's probably the best compendium of his investigations.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, I don't have this is my original book from when I was a kid. This is ridiculous, isn't it? So this is. I mean, I've lost the book cover for Nights in Haunted Houses, but just to say, I've read this so many times as a child. I think. I mean, so many people have these interests in the paranormal from childhood. This was one of mine, I've got to say. And I can remember reading certain accounts of his. I don't know, I can't even remember where particularly, because it all gets kind of muddled up in your memories. But I remember thinking, wow, that's like amazing, the stuff that was happening in that particular book that he recorded. And I suppose with other things, he inspires, he inspired me as a child to go, wow, that's actually a thing. Essentially, ghost hunting is a real thing.
Yeah. That I think some of the most interesting cases are in there, and because they're written about in detail, and that's probably the best one.
Yeah, I love Nights in Haunted Houses. Really good. PJ Jones said, was there some sort of event that made the paranormal popular in the 1970s? Like, I think COVID boosted interest via urbexing. I mean, I think personally it was a cultural thing. It was me personally, think it was just more to do with movies, TV shows, and the Enfield Poltergeist case that came out in the 1970s as well. The Exorcist came out in the 1970s. a whole
Yeah.
bunch of things, really.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you what AI gave me, which is a bit sad that I had to go to it rather than find like a better resource. But it would say like
AI works.
the 70s was a decade of counterculture, questioning traditional beliefs, and that made it more possible to be more open-minded about these sorts of things. But then it also suggested technological advances like video recorders and the equipment that was then folded into the ghost hunting kit. And then, TV shows and things that were on like that. And I suppose, like those things like Amityville, that really Enfield poltergeists, those huge cases happened then at that time.
Yeah.
Films have been made of them, these books, are they real or are they not, and so on. Are they hoaxes? And but I mean, they were huge events. Amityville, things
Just
like
very
that.
briefly, for somebody who devoted his life to this, and the fact that he was well into kind of writing books in the 1970s. When the Enfield case came out, was he kind of dying to get involved in it, or did he kind of, what I mean, when something gets that much attention, do you know whether he was particularly interested in investigating it for himself?
I don't know. I think I remember trying to figure out whether he had any interest in that case, but I think he does mention it. But I think it's perhaps because that was more covered by an investigator from the Society for Psychiatric Research.
SPI.
So maybe it was sort of like, they took that case.
Morris Gross
didn't.
stepping on their toes kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it's sort of like that. It's like, in those police dramas, it's like, well, so-and-so, it's their case now. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Brian saying Houdini gave his wife a secret word that after he died would prove the ghosts are real. Did your grandfather have a post-death plan with any family to possibly prove ghosts? Weird question. I'm drunk, he says.
Well, no, I don't know. I don't think so. But it's more in the way as I suppose I mentioned before, where he seems quite self-evidently interested in the next generation becoming ghost hunters, like as I say, dedicating the Ghost Hunter's Guide to me and my brother. I mean, I'd only noticed that by accident as I'm republishing the book, formatting all the text. I'm like, oh. So I mean, I think that was his wish, but he expressed it through his works more and in the prefaces to his books and the dedications.
Absolutely. And just before we go and kind of wrap things up, in terms of if people interested in your grandfather, Peter Underwood, is the best place to go. Would you recommend the website? I'll put the website.
Well, the Wikipedia article is quite good, to be honest. I think that gives a good basic summary. I always go to Wikipedia for things. It seems a bit shameless to just promote things I've done and say, "Oh, go here." Although that was the idea. Like, I think I'm going to build this, and everyone will come.
I will just say though that Peter Underwood's books, they're out there, they're everywhere, and whether you buy it, new copies or secondhand copies.
Yeah, I got one just from eBay because I lost mine. And it's like $250, marketplace.
Abebooks.co.uk is particularly good. I will just say for literally tap in Peter Underwood, and I mean, so many of his books are a couple of quid basically now.
Absolutely, that you can get most online. On secondhand market. Yeah, without any trouble. Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, and just I would say, yes, they were written a while back, and some look a little bit dated in some, but I absolutely thoroughly recommend you reading your way through them, because it doesn't matter the equipment is not necessarily up to date with what we use now, that the methods and the techniques that he is trying to employ or was spent his life trying to employ, I think is one which we should continue to go down that avenue. And thank you so much, Adam, for coming on and kind of telling us a little bit about. I mean, it's so tricky trying to kind of
invite me. I didn't mean to imply before that I wasn't prepared to stay any longer than my allotted hour or anything. I think
it's fine.
That was just. I mean, because it's such a pleasure to have the chance to talk about him. So thank you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and like I said, it's so great. It's so lovely to be able to speak to a member of his family, somebody who knew him personally, and to kind of, and he is this kind of legendary ghost hunter, and if nobody prior to this had heard of Peter Underwood before, I hope they do now, and I hope they look him up, and you know, get a bit more of attention. I mean, for older generations like myself, slightly older generations, shut up, people in the chat. You know, we kind of grew up with these books. You know, a lot of, you know, they were out there, but they're not out there as much. And it's so lovely.
Yeah, and he did take care with how he wrote things and his manner and style. He always wanted to be a writer, you see, so he channels that into his work and tries to give it as much of a literary quality as he can, because that was the desire that he had as well. So I think it is, you can read the care that he puts into the way he puts things, and it's quite touching. Yeah, and it's quite really quite enjoyable.
Absolutely. Yeah, just, and like I say, just thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure that, you know, people quite would love, you know, to return on and say, look, maybe a bit more, whether it's a certain period in his life or particular locations or anything like that, that you might want to, we could easily spend lots more time on.
Yeah, I love to do it. You know, I'd love to, you know, someone was asking me about him in a particular case. And I'm like, what? This case? The Hexam heads? And they're like these cursed objects. And I'm like, what? I don't remember this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm beginning to remember now. Let's go into this. So someone found these heads, these little sort of carved heads in the ground, and they picked them up, and then suddenly they were cursed. And suddenly they had these terrible experiences in their house. And it's like, oh, my God. And then the objects were taken to an expert, because they were Celtic, a Celtic expert studied the objects, and they were a professor or something. And then in their home, because they housed the objects in their home, they started having these manifestations. And it was like, oh my God, I don't remember this story. But it's so amazing to go back into it, and then you Google Hexam heads or whatever, and the images come up from the newspapers at the time, and then it's like, oh yes, there's the image, and it's in his memoirs. He's got a picture of them in No Common Task. So I love to go back into his work and excavate.
I was just going to say, is there more to discover? You know, whether that's you personally about your granddad, or files that he had, you know, that you are still, you know, are still coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally ignorant, to be honest. So I pretend, I try to have an understanding and try to convey it. And the website was about trying to, present it for other people. But I don't really pretend to be, I still don't pretend to be the expert. I'm still trying to learn. And I should really get into it more again, because like finding out that he had this sprawling file about information that he would just add to all the time from different places, and that this is what became the book. It's like, I want to find that file now. That'd be great to look at. So absolutely, it's a shame to say I don't know as much as I should. So there's definitely a lot more for me to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so long may it continue, because like I said, his work still needs to be highlighted, I think, and even more so, even in modern times with the YouTube generation and things that are ridiculous on the internet regards ghost hunting. My God, do we need more of Peter Underwood? You know, it's a shame that he's no longer with us, but if we can keep shining a light on his work and his techniques and his methods and things like that, I think it would all be a good thing.
Yes. I mean, he wanted to believe, but he always did remain skeptical, and just holding that middle ground between holding out hope, and yet nonetheless, being rigorous and about, well, what do we really have? Do we have the evidence we really need? Or
Yeah, fantastic. Right, I think what we'll do is we'll just finish up there. Thank you so much again, Adam, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And just thank you so much for kind of sharing your granddad's life with us, or a little bit of kind of like personal stuff and some of his kind of his attitudes, and hopefully highlighting some of his books as well that people can check out and find.
Well, I love to go on about it. I just wish that I was more entertaining or lucid. I did my best, but I hope I haven't bored anyone too much.
Absolutely not.
On the ball.
No, definitely not. Thank you so much for coming on, Adam. I loved it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so everybody's watching, just to let you know before I finish up, yes, I was looking at your bloody chat. Thank you very much, those saying how old I am. Yeah, I noticed. What was that about my prostate, Beardo? Yeah. Thanks very much for that. Cheers. Sod. Right, anyway. And my brother getting involved. Bugger. He be old. Yeah, I did see that one. Thank you very much. Anyway. Things I've got to put up with. Yeah, thank you. I was side-eyeing the chat a little bit, so apologies. Yeah, anyway, next week, just so you guys are fully aware, I have Dr. Melvin Willin from the Society for Psychical Research. He is the custodian of the Enfield Poltergeist tape. So he is the one that has put them together and kind of recorded everything on those tapes from the Enfield Poltergeist case, and then brought out this book called the Enfield Podcast Tapes, which he brought out a couple of years ago now. And and so therefore I wanted to talk to him. And so hopefully we can listen. I've not run this by Melvin Willin yet, but I'm hopefully going to see if I can get some recordings from the Enfield case to share with you guys as well. It's going to be a really interesting chat because he was very much on the fence and just literally let the tapes do the speaking when he when he published this book. So I want to try and pin him down in terms of what he thinks went on during the Enfield case, based on Maurice Gross's tapes. So yeah, that is next week, which I'm really, really looking forward to because it is just the most interesting case from my point of view. So yeah, so that is next week. Phew. Right. So just back to here. Yes. Anyway, so yeah, I'm like I said, it's one I'm really, really looking forward to. It should be a really good one, I think, next week. And just so let you know, the week after, so Melvin Willin next week, following week, pinned him down. Dr. Kieran O'Keefe is coming on. I think that's the 16th of December, something like that. So yeah, there will be again. It's going to be a really, really good one. So finishing December with some today, Adam Underwood, amazing. Dr. Melvin Willin talking about the Enfield Poltergeist case. I cannot wait. And Kieran O'Keefe is coming on as well. So phew. All done. So some really, really good guests to come on for the rest of this month. Anyway, thank you guys. I apologize I've not been able to talk to you properly in the chat. So again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for the questions. If you put a question in, thank you very much. The stuff from my brother and me getting old. No, thanks for that, guys. Cheers. Anyway, I see you next week. All right. And have a great rest of the week. Okay, guys. Bye-bye.